Showed me something that was on one of the other expat sites, a report about some man, I think in the Mindanao area, who had who suffered an amputation of one of his legs and is not doing so well. If you really look and you want to find this case, I'm sure that you can. It was a group of expats from, I think, the Mindanao area. The man's neighbours have all pitched in, I think, and helped him, and he's been taken to the hospital where he's receiving good medical attention. I take it that it was a recent amputation of one of his legs. Now, the man is 78 years old, and his girlfriend, apparently, things never happen in ones, do they? His girlfriend left him, which of course is something of a shocker for anybody who's coming out here. And in their case, there was a big age gap between the two. Well, at 78, you would expect that, wouldn't you? I can tell you, okay. He's been abandoned by his girlfriend. Now, they say girlfriend rather than wife. So what do you have? Well, you have a relationship that wasn't really based on firm grounds, is the way that I see it. But then I have been accused in the past of not telling expats or potential expats to be, about the dangers of moving out to the Philippines. And it's the way that I feel is that it's not really my place to tell people about dangers. It's not my place to make forecasts about how safe or how much in danger a person will be if they come out and resettle in the Philippines. For myself, I've had the experience of living in Bohol. I live in Bohol. We live in the mountains. We live in quite an isolated place, as probably most of you who are followers know. We live high in the mountains, and if you wanted to view it that way, we would be regarded as being vulnerable. We have not chosen to be that way, so we don't actually feel unsafe. Worst thing I feel is, as one practically minded person wrote to me and said, you know, if you go on your walks alone, you really should take a cell phone in case you fall down and you can't get back up. It's a cheery thought, isn't it? But a practical one, and I understand that. We're not talking about dangers there. We're not talking about if a mountain lion that's been recently released from a passing circus is going to jump out and eat me. We're talking about something that is real, and I'm all for that. Is it going to happen to any of us that we're going to have a leg amputated and then abandoned by a girlfriend? I don't know about that. All of these things can happen regardless of where you live. That's my take on it. You can get run over by a bus in the street in any city in the world, just provided they have buses running. You can get any kind of catastrophe can be inflicted upon you by fate. It just depends on where you are. It depends on what you do, the kind of life you lead. And in the main, I have actually one friend that I saw this morning, just to say hello to. He chooses not to be on people's videos. He chooses to lead a quiet life. He lives quietly. He doesn't live in a dangerous place, but then neither do I. But most people think that maybe there are dangers to where I live, and I suppose that they may well think that there are dangers to where he lives. But he's taken a way of living that suits him. He prefers to keep low profile, and who can blame him for that? This is wise choices for a man who knows the way that he likes to live. And everybody that lives anywhere, a pulse is the only requirement for getting in trouble sometimes. As long as you've got a pulse, something can happen. There's no guarantees. There are no guarantees. You know, I know someone who went through their entire life without having a single mishap. And then it was like all hell broke loose. Somebody that I know in Florida said he enjoyed perfect health until he turned 70. And then it was like everything started breaking down. So we really don't know. If you remember a few famous cases, you know, there's Ella Fitzgerald. Ella Fitzgerald, loved by the world, probably one of the most famous jazz singers. Jazz is not something that people often always get famous with, but Ella Fitzgerald was another Louis Armstrong. She was a female Louis Armstrong, wasn't she? A brilliant singer, a musician. And then I think she became diabetic, and I'm not quite sure if she's still alive or not. I sincerely hope so, but the chances are that she's not. She developed diabetes and eventually had to have some amputations done as well, both legs, I believe. So after having this incredible life that happens right towards the end. And yet there are others who go through a life almost of anonymity and then become famous when they get very old. Ma Moses is an artist who, she used to crochet very nice blankets and things, which were bought and which she made a comfortable living with, right? And she was very skilled at what she did. But then for that intricate use of the needles and, you know, and threading and knotting and all of that, her hands became a little arthritic, and she decided that she would start painting. And she had an unusual way of painting. She did what most people would call stick figures, and she would do large scenes of things like schoolyards with lots of children playing, and they were all there and they were all doing their various activities, but they were doing them in a very simplistic form. I believe it was called primitive in style. She was, I think, in at least her late 70s, possibly 80s. And her work is in some very famous homes. So who knows what adventure life is going to unfold in front of us when we progress through our lives. You really don't know. You know, some of the people who have been most famous, Van Gogh, or Van Gogh as they call him in England at least. Van Gogh, or Van Gogh, he suffered greatly. He suffered very greatly, and it was his brother that helped him to sell his work. Now you literally almost cannot buy his work because it's so not just because it's so incredibly expensive, it's regarded as being priceless. And yet he was a missionary working on coal fields in, I believe, France, helping these poor peasant women. In fact, at that time it was a bizarre choice for an artist to choose to paint peasants. I mean, logically speaking, who would be interested in buying a painting that was a figure of a peasant woman working on a coal mine? Not a coal mine. What happened was they used to have these slag heaps where the waste was put, but of course it actually had lots of coal in it, and people used to scrounge a living out of this by doing this. And he tried to minister to them, and he lived in the most appalling conditions. And he did these bizarre paintings, which are now in the bizarre price range because they're worth millions of dollars. So we really never know how things are going to turn out. I remember that Americans, a party of Americans, or at least a couple, were at a famous store in London, and they were there on the day that a terrorist group, an Irish group, decided that they were going to bomb the place, and they did. And the American, I'm not sure whether it was man or woman, lost his legs. What are the chances of being in that place at that particular time and suffer that kind of injury? There's that young girl who was a champion surfer. She was out on her surfboard and paddling, one arm into the water, and a shark said thank you very much and took her arm off. It hasn't made any difference to her intention to do exactly what she was doing when her arm was taken off. So, not only do we not know how things are going to turn out, it's anybody's guess how we're going to react. Now this man that I started off this conversation with, he's had his leg taken off, and the pictures I saw, it was no great thing to see, not a happy thing to see. He was lying on his bed, and he'd had the leg amputated, goodness knows when, but he had to be taken to hospital. A Filipino boy in his late 20s that we helped some time ago when we felt that we were able to, mistakenly, all right, just for the record, and we helped him and we took him to hospital, and he had his right leg amputated. Now, he'd come to us a year before, and we took him to see a surgeon back then, and the surgeon gave his verdict, and his verdict was that the leg would have to be amputated. The boy at the time the young man at the time just couldn't face that. Now, when he came back over a year later, the diagnosis had changed, and when we took him to the hospital, I actually went into the meeting with the surgeon, with the young man, and I asked, what can you tell me? What can you tell me in English? He'd already spoken to the boy. Said, does he understand the situation? And the situation was not a good one, because the tumour had spread its cancer right up to the groin, and had apparently progressed. And now, rather than what probably had been just an amputation, was an amputation which would not cure. So I had to sit there and listen to this with this young man as he heard this news. It was not a cure. My next question, how long? How long does he have if it's not a cure? What is it? It's just to give him some relief from the pain. So how long? He said about 14 months. Now, we haven't heard from, that was Dennis. We haven't heard from Dennis in a while, and when we go to the usual place, which is the community of the three little girls who we are friends with the mother, and often go there, and I pick those kids up every Sunday for church in my truck, and I take either we take them home or we give them money to get home on a tricycle. It just depends. And so we ask about Dennis, and he's not there now. Now, a couple of weeks after he had his right leg amputated, he was riding a motorcycle. So even the way that it's going to impact you, you can have the most terrible news, and the way that it's going to impact you, even that is different. And the videos that we took of Dennis when we went back to see how he was were amazing. He was smiling, he was optimistic, positive, and was determined to actually literally get back in the saddle. And he was right before our friend Kerry from Australia, our motorman, decided that he could do something with the braking system so that he didn't have to brake with a non-existent right leg. He was actually pivoting on on the seat. We're talking about being in a very small, slow-moving, sleepy community, okay? We're not talking about dashing around Cebu in the city. So he was able to brake by turning around in the saddle on the move. I know it sounds terrible, but he was able to do that gymnastic and brake. Amazing. Just amazing. So, as we've said before, you know, you can help someone, but you can't make them want to survive. You can't give someone that essential life force that will have them say, yes, I'm going to do this. When we were sitting once, Beth and I were having lunch in Vedesto, and I saw passing by a group of youngsters who looked like they were teens, right, maybe 18 to 20. And one of them was walking along with crutches, and had obviously had one leg amputated. And right at that time, I was in the middle of making things and doing things, and I thought maybe I can help him. And so actually went out of the restaurant and I followed him down, and I introduced myself, and I said, look, if you know, maybe I can help you with this. And I told him who I was and what I did, and that I tried to help. And I asked him, you know, here's my phone number. Give me a call and talk to me, and maybe we can get you onto a prosthetic leg so that you'll be able to walk without that crutch. He did, many weeks afterwards, call me. But after that, I explained to him, look, I've never made a prosthetic leg, but I've made a lot of other things, and it would only be a matter of working out how best to comfortably encase the stump into a comfortable seating, if you like, so that it wasn't agony to wear. And then a matter of working out what the joint would be that would allow the foot to pivot, which is what modern prosthetics do. And if it's being done anywhere in the world, that joint, that particular joint, is available. So I asked him, if you're willing to work with me, then maybe I can help you. Maybe we can help each other to help you. He never called me back again, and I've never seen him since. So you can't get someone to do something if they're not willing to do it. So that man, I wish him well. It inspired this talk about the danger of danger itself and the perception of it, and what happens once we respond to a certain often damaging situation which leaves us in some way impaired. Life goes on, and that's the biggest lesson. Life goes on. We don't know what life is going to say. a terrible saying that I always disliked, but it was a favourite of a friend of mine, Bob. And Bob always used to say, every day above ground is a good day, or a blessing, or something like that. But it was every day above ground. So that was his way of looking at it. This is A Foreigner in the Philippines. I hope you've gotten something out of the chat.